Hi Islanders, this is Hana, and welcome back to my island. 10 years ago, I was leaving my life in Korea behind. I would move to a small remote island overseas to start a career as a diving instructor. While I trained to become an instructor, I spent my days at what people in the diving world call a Korean shop, a business run mostly by Korean expats. But something bothered me. New instructors who had just passed their certification exam weren't teaching students. Instead, they spent months following senior instructors around. They carried gear, they filled the tanks, they wiped anti-fog solution onto students' masks, and they weren't paid a single one for any of it. The senior instructors treated this as completely normal. Be grateful, they would say. We are giving you the chance to gain experience. Every time I heard that, I asked myself the same question. Isn't the whole point of a certification that you are already qualified? Eventually, I left the Korean shop. I moved to a Western shop staffed mostly by Europeans. That's when I realized something. What I would say wasn't how the world worked. It was just how Korean shops worked. At the Western shop, the day you got certified as an instructor, you started working as an instructor. Full stop. An instructor with 20 years of experience and one who had just passed the test did the same work and got paid the same for it. Nobody asked your age. Nobody asked how many years you've put in. The certification itself was the qualification. That was it. That's when I first started to wonder, why does Korea keep demanding a second qualification even after you've already earned the first one? And the second qualification almost always turns out to be age. I saw the same pattern before I left Korea, back when I worked as an editor at a fashion magazine. Every magazine had people known as Oshi, short for assistant. Instead of hiring reporters through an open, formal process, magazines brought people in as assistants or interns. They would work for months, sometimes years, for no pay or something close to it. If they were lucky and a spot opened up, they might eventually be promoted to full reporter. I never understood that system, not from the start. I would come up through an independent magazine, working my way to full reporter before being scouted by a major outlet. I never figured out what you were supposed to learn by staying an assistant that long. Then around 2015, the exploitation in the magazine industry hit the news. People called it passion pay, unpaid or barely paid labor dressed up as an opportunity. Every magazine panicked. They scrapped the assistant system as if it had never existed. Once the outrage died down, the system quietly came back. Of the people who survived those unpaid years, most came from families with money. People who could afford to work as a fashion magazine as something close to a hobby. Passion pay wasn't really about passion. It was filtered that sorted people by class, not by talent. It asked one question: can you afford to hold out? Back then, social media wasn't what it is now. There weren't many ways to speak out. The older generation's authority was far more blatant than it is today. Young people held on through years labeled internship, assistantship, or probation just to add one line to their resume. Those who couldn't hold on left quietly. Nobody remembers their names. I sometimes wonder where they are now and what they are doing. I'd been sitting with these memories for a while. Then a recent news story dragged them back up. Park Ji-sung was appointed as one of the two leaders chosen to head to reform committee at the Korean Football Association. To understand why he ended up there, you need a bit of backstory. In the summer of 2026, Korea failed to make it out of the group stage at the World Cup in North America. For a country that lives and breathes football, that failure landed hard. But the World Cup exit wasn't really where the story started. For years, the Korean Football Association had been under fire for how it picks national team coaches and for a culture of favoritism and closed door decision making inside the organization. Once the World Cup disappointment hit, all of that finally came to a head. The head coach, Hong Myung-bo, resigned. The association's own president announced he would step down too. In response, the government and Korean football stepped in together. They formed a temporary body called the K-Football Innovation Committee, meant to fix the system before a new leadership takes over. Park Ji-sung was named the co-chair alongside Yoo Sung-min, the head of the Korean Sports and Olympic Committee. Fellow former players Lee Young-pyo and Park Ju-ho joined as committee members too. That's the moment the regional chairman decided to speak up. He said Park Ji-sung and Lee Young-pyo were national team players in football, sure, but what did they know about life, about the law, about the real world? Who were they to lead reform? Park Ji-sung is 45 years old. He's the player people once said would never have made the national team without guts hitting. He's the Dutch coach who managed Korea's national team in 2002. For years, he stood outside the tight academic and regional networks that quietly decide who gets ahead in Korean football. He built a long career at Manchester United, one of the biggest clubs in the English Premier League. And even after that, he was never fully let inside Korea's football establishment. Now, the moment he tried to touch the corruption in the association, the response wasn't logic. It was not a counter argument either. It was one line: you are not qualified to speak. And the standard for that qualification out of nowhere was age. It's almost funny if it weren't so absurd. This is a man who advised the FIFA and played for years in the world's best league. And someone told him he didn't know enough about real life. This isn't ignorance talking, it's calculated. You can't win the argument on logic, so you deny the person's right to make it at all. The philosopher Miranda Fricker has a name for this: testimonial injustice. It's when you distrust what someone says, not because of the content, but because of who they are. When their words aren't even worth arguing with. The first time I read the idea, I thought it belonged to courtrooms and academic papers. It doesn't. I've seen it play out at a dive center on a remote island in the middle of the ocean, in a fashion magazine's newsroom in the heart of Seoul, and now at the Korea Football Association. In Korean homes, schools, workplaces, and society, it happens every day. Wherever age, seniority, and rank determine who gets to speak, there's no real debate to begin with. There's only speech that flows downward. Anything that pushes back from below gets labeled disrespect. What made it worse was something the same chairman said in the same interview. He was talking about the former association president Chung Mong-gyu, who had just stepped down. Oh, nobody's perfect but God, he said. He didn't deserve that much criticism. So a 45-year-old Park Ji-sung isn't even allowed to make mistakes. But a man who ran the organization for 22 years without transparency or competence deserves understanding for his. That's not a double standard. It's two entirely different clocks. One side never ages, never answers for anything. The other side stays unqualified no matter how old they get. Is this just a Korean disease? Older people refusing to let go of power, using age as a shield to silence the next generation? No. Humans have always been like this. Political scientists have a word for it: gerontocracy, ruled by the old. The median age in the US House of Representatives is 57. In the Senate, it's over 63. The median age across the entire US population is 39, which means Congress lives in an entirely different world from the people it represents. Europe is worse. Between 1990 and 2005, the median age of voters across OECD countries rose 3 times faster than it had in the previous 30 years. Italy is often cited as the clearest example. Its political gerontocracy hardened into gerontocracy across the whole society. In Asia, it's even more blatant. In countries like Nepal and Indonesia, more than half the population is under 30. And yet the people actually running those countries are far older. The leaders of Nepal, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and Myanmar are mostly in their 70s or beyond. Nobody holds them accountable for it. So the instinct to hold on to the power as you age, that's close to a universal human trait. Though there's real pushback in Western academic circles too. Yes, there's a correlation between age and wealth. But whether concentrate power among the elderly actually distorts politics, labor markets, and housing markets that badly, the evidence is still thin. In other words, older people holding on to their assets happens everywhere. How much damage is actually caused is still debated, even in the West. But here's what I really want to say. What makes Korea unusual isn't that older people hold on to power. It's the language used to justify it. In the West, gerontocracy is mostly explained through institutions and demographics, things like a voter turnout gap or wealth accumulation. Korea has an extra layer on top of that: the habit of dividing speech into formal and informal registers, the seniority culture inside every organization. The way titles like hyung or sunbae, meaning older brothers or senior, automatically establish a hierarchy. The idea that age decides whose turn it is to speak isn't written into any rule book. It's written into our language and our bodies. When the regional chairman asked Park Ji-sung how much of life he had lived, that line exists in no regulation anywhere. And yet nobody questioned whether he had the right to say it, because it governs the spirit and philosophy of the whole group. It's hard to even imagine an alternative. To put it plainly, the instinct to hold on to your seat as you age exists everywhere in humanity. But the specific language that turns the instinct into an instant win without any debate, the phrase, "what do you know?" that shuts the other person's mouth completely, that's been sharpened with a particular precision in Korea and other Confucian influenced societies. Other countries at least have the fight. Here, you have to pass a qualifying exam before the fight can even start. I'm a millennial close to Park Ji-sung's age. My generation entered college being called the hope of the new millennium. But after the 1997 financial crisis hit while we were in high school, often called the IMF crisis in Korea, neoliberal reforms reshaped the country. By the time we graduated college, temporary contracts, short-term work, and youth unemployment were waiting for us. The same older generation, the same media, the same society that had once called us the hope of the new millennium gave us new names instead. The 880,000 won generation, a name based on the average monthly wage of a young, regular worker. Then the surplus generation, Then the first generation poorer than their parents. And finally, they landed on this. Youth hurts. That's just what it means to be young. As if the whole thing were just a matter of attitude. Our parents' generation rode a wave of industrialization and rising real estate prices straight up. We never got that wave. Each of us had to swim on our own with nothing to carry us. Now, having swum past 40, we are hearing the same thing again. This time, instead of being told that we are too young, we are placed in an odd middle ground. Too old, but somehow still not adults either. People in their 20s and 30s mock us as young 40, pretending to be young past our time. People in their 50s and 60s ask us how much of life you've actually lived. Even when our track record already proves it, you are still treated as people whose turn hasn't come yet. Our bodies are fully grown adults. Society just won't give us clothes that fit. Peter Pan was originally a story about a child who refused to grow up. But in this country right now, it's people in their 40s who are being refused the chance to grow up. That's why Park Ji-sung's new position on the Reform Committee feels so symbolic. He got the title, he didn't get the key. The real power in the organization still sits with the old guard, people like the regional chairman. Most millennials are standing right around that same spot. We've earned the qualification to take something on. We haven't been handed the power to actually change it. There's a time factor layered on top of all this too. Life expectancy in Korea is now past 83 years. But our society agreements about retirement, about handing over our seats, about making room for the next generation are still built for a time when the average lifespan was 60. The sociologist Matilda White Riley called this mismatch structural lag. Our bodies and our lives have stretched out. The clothes society gives us to wear haven't. The debate raging in Korea right now over extending the retirement age is exactly this mismatch wearing a different face. Most older workers are pushed out of their main jobs well before they hit the legal retirement age. And yet the age at which they would actually like to retire is much later than that, because their retirement income isn't enough to live on. That desperation is real. But if you extend the retirement age to solve it, those extra years come directly out of the pool of jobs available to young people. Older workers want to hold their seats longer. That's understandable. The fear of leaving out old age with no income is real. But the longer they hold those seats, the fewer doors open for the young to walk through in the first place. I don't want to blame individual older people for wanting to extend their working years. They didn't build a society where you can work your whole life and still face an uncertain old age, not by themselves. But I do want to ask something of the people designing the solution entirely around shrinking young people's opportunities, the ones who want to raise the retirement age without touching the wage structure underneath it. Why does the fix always come from the bottom? Youth researchers have a word for this stretch stalled time, waithood, a period where marriage, buying a home, finding a job, all of it just keeps getting pushed back indefinitely. One reason they point to is the seats older generations refuse to give up. The glass ceiling our generation ran into as young people has become a thicker ceiling for the generation below us now. And it's not just the people in their 20s and 30s waiting under that ceiling. People in their 40s are still down there too, waiting for their turn. What we are all waiting for is a seat with a name on it, recognition. And now artificial intelligence has entered the picture. Semiconductor exports are hitting record highs. Meanwhile, youth employment is the worst it's been since the pandemic. Entry-level hiring at major companies has been cut in half in just 1 year. There are now people who've earned their certified public accountant license and still can't find a job. In the past, at least there was a spot to be exploited in. Passion pay ground up your youth for free, but at least it gave you a shot at crossing the threshold. Now the threshold itself is despairing. Even the chance to be exploited is turning into a privilege. Artificial intelligence doesn't train new hires. It only makes people who are already skilled more efficient. So companies have less and less reason to spend the time and money training someone from scratch. Today's generation in their 20s and 30s is facing something even more fundamental than the passion pay we went through. We were exploited at the door, but at least we got in. The young people now are watching the door itself close. I don't want to end this on cynicism. I understand the older generation wish to keep working longer. I understand the younger generation's desperate struggle to find a single seat. Both of them just want to survive. The problem is not the people. It's the container, the society that's grown old and worn out. A container that divides the right to speak, the right to sit, the right to dignity by age and seniority. And the person who tried to break the container happened to be a 45-year-old former national team player. Even he got publicly shut down with the words, "What do you know?" I find that unbearably sad. The truest measure of a society is how the older generation treats the next one, how others treat the young. If you don't have the ability, you should at least have sincerity. The people who shape this way of thinking are the same people sitting in high places in society right now, the so-called others of this generation. They tell the young and middle-aged, "What do you know?" questioning their qualifications, while they themselves created, went along with, or silently watched the corruptions, unfairness, and cronyism take hold. And when someone criticizes them for it, they justify it by saying, "We all had to make a living somehow." Whether it was laziness, incompetence, or willful blindness, they owe at least some sense of responsibility. Nobody, whether they are in their 20s or their 40s, asked to be born into this container. We were simply placed into it in the order we were born. Time moves the same way for everyone. So this is not a fight between generations. It's a fight between all of us and a container that's grown old. What makes me angry isn't those wishes to hold on or to get ahead. It's the people who use those wishes to protect their own seats. The people who hide behind age to dodge an argument. The people who, the instant a reform arrives, are the first to ask, "Are you even qualified? How old are you?" They've always existed. They will keep existing. And underneath them, the people without power keep turning on each other instead. The young mock people in their 40s as young 40. People in their 40s call the young fragile. The old click their tongues at both, saying neither one understands anything. Meanwhile, the person actually refusing to give up their seat sits quietly at the top. And underneath, people with no seat at all keep firing arrows at each other. I think that might be the sadness scene in this country. When I dive, whether you're a beginner or a master instructor, you feel the same pressure on the water. Going through certification after certification from open water to instructor, I used to joke about it. Is there a traffic cop down there checking anyone's certification card, making sure nobody goes past their maximum depth? What's the point of any of it? The only ones making money are the diving associations. But the truth is, the ocean doesn't ask your age. It doesn't ask your years of experience. It doesn't ask for your qualifications. It only asks one thing. How honestly are you breathing right now in this moment? I wish our society could be more like that water. A place that doesn't ask how many years you endured unpaid in the name of passion. A place that asks instead, what can you do right now? What can you do next? A place where the day you earn your qualification, you are recognized for it, transparently and honestly, starting the very next day. What seat am I standing in right now, being asked to prove myself all over again? Is that demand a fair one? Or is it just an old container trying to protect whose turn it is? That question shouldn't be one I ask myself anymore. It's time to ask it of the people holding the container. So, what did you think? How does this play out in your own community or your own country? Let me know in the comments below. If this resonated with you, hit like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can join as a member. Until next time, this has been Hana's Island. Take care and stay well on your own island.